Hey, welcome to Integrated Preparedness. I'm Steve Smith. I want to talk today about police shootings. No doubt you are familiar with the latest one. Hopefully, it's the latest one that happened up in Minnesota outside Minneapolis. I forget the name of the town, Brooklyn or Brookline or something like that. Two officers pulled over a guy. I forget what the situation was exactly. The male officer was attempting to cuff. They had him out of the car. They cuffed or he was attempting to cuff the individual, the suspect. And if I recall, well, it doesn't matter whether it was a felony or a misdemeanor or a traffic or whatever. He was cuffing him. As he was cuffing him, the individual attempted to break free. That happens a lot. It happens more often than those of you who haven't been in the business would realize. It's always been kind of confusing to me that the guy tries to break away once you've got a cuff on him, but I guess that's when reality hits some of these guys. So anyway, they're tussling around, and this guy, the suspect, was attempting to get back into his vehicle. As a matter of fact, did get back into his vehicle. There's a mistake. There are a lot of mistakes here I'm going to talk about in a minute. The second officer, a female, who was apparently the training officer of the male, went around, started and pulled her service revolver. Anybody who watched the video knew it was, I'm sorry, I'm an old guy, right? I said service revolver, service weapon. It was an auto loader, probably a Glock, who knows? Doesn't matter. Anybody who watched it, the video, knows that wasn't a taser. She starts yelling, taser, taser. Well, first she says, I'm going to tase you, and then starts yelling, taser, taser, taser. Pulls the trigger, shoots the guy because it was a pistol, not a taser. The guy drives off and dies a few blocks, I guess, later. Okay, there's so much wrong with this. I can't even, I don't know if I'll be able to get to all of it, but I want to add something else. We had something much like this close by up in Lawrence, Kansas, 2 years ago. Two rookie cops, a male and a female, pull over a guy. I believe there was a warrant on him. He would not get out of his vehicle. And so I think the male officer was trying to get him out of the vehicle. The female officer comes up, draws her weapon, and shoots him. Later on, saying that she mistakenly drew her weapon instead of her taser. And she was allowed to resign. Now, I've heard that the first one up here that I talked about up in Minnesota, the chief of police called this an accidental discharge. Okay, now that's a term that many of us used long ago in AD. It just got into the vernacular. There's no such thing as an accidental discharge. It's a negligent discharge, and there's no such thing as a negligent discharge when your finger is on the trigger and you pull it. You meant to discharge what was in your hand. Okay, let me back up here, because these police shootings are going to be driving what's coming next. I'll be talking about that in tomorrow's, and that is the coming race war. The idea, first off, when they stopped this guy up in Minnesota, they had him out of the car. They were cuffing him, and he was able to break loose of a very large police officer. Okay, there is no way he should have been able to break loose from that guy if the guy had been competent, and that is the problem. Too many of these officers, and this doesn't apply to all of them today, but too many of them today enter law enforcement as a profession that they think they're going to, maybe they want to help their community. I'm not going to say that they don't, They don't understand the violence that is inherent in the job. They're not ready for it. They don't come from a violent background like most of us did back in my day. It's unusual to them. It's a shock to them. They don't know what to do. They go through, to be real honest, because I've watched the defensive tactics and some police academies. They go through what is I will only call a ridiculous defensive tactics program that prepares them essentially to get their butts kicked, not to get their butts home. And then they go out there and they think that the world is going to do what they say because they have a badge on. The world doesn't care. The bad guys don't care that you have a badge on. All they want to do is, they are the opponent, in case you haven't recognized that yet. And there are some of those opponents who will fight. And when they start to, it becomes a surprise to too many of our police officers. So when this guy started tussling and didn't want to be handcuffed, he got himself back into his seat. The idea that he was able to get himself back inside his vehicle once this large police officer already had his hands on him is beyond belief to me. Okay. Now, if there are any people out there who are going to say, well, you don't understand in this, hey, I understand perfectly. I did the job for too long, and I dealt with this stuff all the time. And I tell you, if we wanted somebody out of a car back then, and they didn't want to come out, they would come out the window, and they would come out quick, and they would come out with one officer helping them out. And back then, if you couldn't do it, you didn't need to be on the job. And there were some who couldn't do it, and they didn't last. But now everybody, it's a different world, and that's part of the problem. The problem is that these people nowadays, they are neither confident or competent in their ability to handle people without the use of weapons. They can't use their hands. They don't have a background for it. They don't have the training for it. And so as soon as somebody wants to give them an argument, all of a sudden out comes the pepper spray, out comes the taser, and then, as we've seen in a couple of incidences here, they draw a weapon instead of a taser, and we get somebody killed. Well, you can say all you want to about, well, these people need to obey the police. Well, okay, I understand that, but I also know that we don't have a death penalty for resisting arrest. And when the cops can't deal with it physically, that's what happens. This latest one, as I saw, she has been allowed to resign. Okay, so she's lost her job. But another human being has lost their life. These are going to pile on one after another. We've had too many of these things. It's because of the lack of understanding of the potential violence of the world on the part of too many of these police officers who are out here nowadays. And we're losing the good ones. The ones who can handle this stuff aren't putting up with the ridiculous policies that are coming out. But too many of the people out here just aren't up to the job. That's going to escalate, and that's going to blow up on us real quick. So am I blaming the officer? Yes, I am. She drew a weapon. She drew a service pistol instead of a taser. You have one of each. One is bright yellow. That ought to be the first clue. If you're looking at your weapon and you're looking, doesn't matter whether you're taking up your sights or not, when you see what you have held out in front of you, if you think it's a taser and it's not bright yellow, guess what? You don't have your taser. These are people who are unable to deal with the stress of the situation. And for anybody who says, well, but it's a very stressful situation, you just don't know. Yes, I know exactly what I'm talking about. The problem is, now back when I was on, we dealt with this stuff all the time. The ones that these are happening to, they don't deal with this all the time. And as far as what I mean there is people resisting arrest and people not wanting to get out of their car and trying to get back in their car. That was a nightly occurrence. This is nothing new. There is nothing that these officers are dealing with nowadays that we didn't deal with back then. The difference is the officers, and I don't know whether it's their training or their emotional and mental makeup. I know a lot of it is the latter because they don't come into it with a history of understanding violence. But what's happening is it's going to drive us into some really bad problems. I want to give you another example of something that happened here in right in my area just a couple of years ago. A family was out to dinner. They got a call from one of their foster son's friends, who said that their foster son was it a foster son? It was an adopted son, and got a call from her friend saying that he was on one of these social media things. I don't know. Making statements that he wanted to end his life and things like that. So the friend called the parents. I think, I'm not sure all the intricacies up to that point. The parents were out to eat. They called the police. They said, we've received this information. Would you go past there on a welfare check and make sure he's okay? And so the police showed up. There were several officers showed up at once, and they knocked on the door. I don't believe there was an answer. One of the officers, the garage door opened. The family SUV started backing out of the driveway. Now, one of the officers, the officer who ended up killing the kid, and I gave away the ending, maintained that the vehicle was coming out of the garage at a high rate of speed. You know what I would do? My first thing, if a vehicle was coming towards me at a high rate of speed, I would jump out of the way. How about you all? Yeah, well, this officer did, apparently, because the vehicle didn't hit him. After the officer did not get hit, he then proceeded to fire 13 rounds into that vehicle, killing this 16-year-old kid. 13 rounds. We have a large segment of our law enforcement community that is incompetent or out of control. And they're going to drive this country into the next civil war. And there may be some people out there who take exception to what I'm saying. But I doubt that anybody out there can put their experience in this ahead of mine. So if anybody wants to talk about it, please give us your experience and your opinions as to why I'm wrong. There's not a lot more to be said about this. We used to hold police officers to a much higher standard than we do now. I'm not sure where all of these people are coming. You probably also saw the one where those two officers pulled over an Army lieutenant. They claim that there's a racial element to this too. I don't know. And told him to get out of his vehicle, and then had to resort to a chemical spray and such as that. Now, we'll find out more about the details of that. But if it was a situation that actually warranted him having to get out of the vehicle, then they need to be able to take him out of the vehicle. And officers who have to rely on chemical weapons and tasers to do this are not able to handle what they apparently are not dealing with very often on the streets, which is why they are getting into these problems. So I think these problems are going to continue, and I think as they continue, people are going to get more upset, and I'll tell you what, rightfully so. That's going to make the police respond in a more either a hands-off, which is going to just fuel the flames of civil disobedience, or they're going to become more aggressive because they're mad at how they're being viewed. Whichever way it goes, this is a recipe for disaster. And I will say, I would say to all the officers out there who are out there now, you ones who are still left, and I know that there's fewer and fewer of you out there, those of you who are still left who are competent and confident in your abilities, I know you're doing the job right. Hold these other people to account. And you chiefs of police, and so many times these chiefs of police are just too anxious to throw their own officers under the bus because, by the time somebody gets to be a chief, usually they're a politician, not a cop. This guy was kind of the other way. Don't try to play this stuff off as an accidental discharge. That's just total BS. And we need to expect a little bit more out of all of our people. We give people a gun and a badge, and we expect them to do a job, and we have a right as citizens, no matter what the situation is, to expect them to do it properly, and to be able to do it properly. And if they're putting out cops nowadays who can't do the job, that is endangering the lives of American citizens. So I'm going to leave it at that. I bet there's going to be some disagreements. Be very, very careful how you propose it, because I will expect you to back it up. Okay. Well, I won't end with what I always say, because this isn't really about preparedness, but I suppose it is in a way that we prepare well today in order to live well tomorrow. One of the ways that we prepare well today is to make sure that our law enforcement is properly trained and able to do the jobs that we expect them to do. And if they're not, which means that we have not properly prepared that, our tomorrow is going to be far more dangerous than it needs to be. So you all have a good day. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.